Hello and welcome to the Fast Break pregame show. My name is Aman Kidwai, manager of the UConn blog and the Fast Break newsletter. This is a first for our show. We're doing it after a UConn loss. We'll have a breakdown of what went down in Omaha and then preview Saturday's Villanova matchup. This show is a production of the Fast Break newsletter. We've got a bunch of writers and photo, video, podcast people going deep on UConn men's basketball, featuring in-depth reporting and analysis of the team, as well as some really detailed stuff on the program's history. The show is also a production of 22 Threads, purveyors of fine t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and other gear inspired by the Connecticut culture and lifestyle. They just launched a new line of Hassan Diarra gear that you should all go check out. That's 22threads.com. Okay, so the UConn Huskies, after beating the bejesus out of Marquette and earning a unanimous number one ranking, they fly over to Creighton and get walloped by the Blue Jays. Greg McDermott's squad shot 50% from three and 55% from the floor. Both of those numbers were hovering around 60 across the second half. Donovan Clingan got into some early foul trouble, which spelled early doom for the Huskies, who were really never able to recover from the 14-point hole they fell into in the first half. Now, still, UConn is 24-3, still first in the Big East with a healthy margin, third in KenPom, third offensively, but the defensive ranking has slipped all the way down to 24. Patrick, I don't think too many fans are panicking about the third loss of the season with 4 games left, but what do you make of what happened at Creighton, and what did they do to succeed in that game?
Look, I'm rewatching The Wire now as an aside, and the quote, the famous quote from Omar Little comes to mind. If you come at the king, you best not miss, and that is exactly what Creighton did. They could not miss. It was very reminiscent. I saw this on Twitter. I have to pull it up. In January 20th of 2014, Creighton went 9 of 9 from three in 6 minutes to be at that to beat Villanova on the road. It was Greg McDermott's first top five win. And then now, February 20th, 2024, fast forward 10 years, Creighton goes 8 of 9 from three in 10 minutes versus UConn. It was just a blitz, and it was Creighton's first win over a top ranked team. In three of UConn's losses, their opponents have shot 52% from three. So going on an absurd heater, that's not nothing. Creighton only shot 6 times within 4.5 feet of the hoop. That is insane when you have a 7'2" dude like Ryan Kalkbrenner. They average 15 and a half attempts per game in that area. And schematically on defense, they did some things worth talking about. They shut down Carrot Cam, or Alex Caravan and Cam Spencer, combined 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists. But what they did is they went over every screen. Previously, like UConn's big problems were that teams were switching everything. With this, they just simply went over every screen and rescreen. And if there were slips and counters, as UConn's intricate offense always has, you've got a 7'2" dude and Kalkbrenner waiting in the paint. So Creighton ran UConn off the 3-point line and funneled them into their tall guy. Sound familiar? And it worked to perfection when you factor in shooting over 50% from three and a raucous home crowd that, for the record, did copy UConn's split colored fan
Strike
section
out.
or whatever. But the stripe out, there we go. I like that name though. But this isn't Independence Day where like someone figures out how to destroy these unstoppable aliens and boom, everything is over. Like Creighton is a very unique team, and what they did in their personnel is very hard to replicate. And also, for the record, like while 19-point loss looks bad, it did get to it did get to 10 points at the under four timeout, which was Hurley's goal, if you remember from like the in the huddle that they had shown. And what happened after that? Diarra got whistled for a weird foul, like bumping into Kalkbrenner. UConn missed 5 straight shots, and Creighton had 9 field goals. If they weren't exerting all that energy to reduce that 23-point lead, it the the final result would have looked a little more palpable. But I mean, yeah, when you run into a buzzsaw, you run into a buzzsaw.
Yeah, I mean, this was a perfect storm in a lot of different ways. First of all, it's UConn's fourth game in 10 days. I think you could see the fatigue, especially UConn guys like running into people, being a step slow defensively or to loose balls, things like that. And then, of course, yeah, you have an outlier shooting performance with Creighton from three, and UConn actually having one of its worst shooting nights of the season. And so I think that's an area, they only hit three pointers on the night. So that's not going to be good for your EFG. And actually, even on the rebounding front, UConn did not do well. I know if you look at just the boards, it's 32-30, but it was actually one of UConn's worst offensive rebounding percentages allowed of the season. And so that's kind of a good, a healthy note on some of the advanced stats there. You see those rebounding numbers. You even see UConn's offensive rebounding numbers higher than Creighton's in this game. However, a big part of rebounding is how many chances do you have to rebound? And so in this case, Creighton was not missing so many and rebounding a high rate of its misses. So that's what really took UConn down here. And then, we talk about EFG a lot, a very elegant metric that I'm a big fan of, giving 1.5 credit for a three-pointer. UConn's EFG in this case, not going to be even much better than its field goal percentage. And so that's what you have, even though it was a solid night for UConn offensively. And then, yeah, I mean, I think Creighton has a good roster. This is a good matchup for them, or at least they match up better than almost any other country in the team again, team in the country against UConn. They've got a 7-footer. They've got good length across the roster. They've got multiple guys who can score. So again, like you said, sounds a little bit familiar. Maybe they got a little poor man's UConn thing going, but uh, there's maybe only a couple of other teams with that kind of roster for UConn to worry about. Um, we'll just say, a little bit of a silver lining, that man Tristen Newton, he can ball. You talked about that second half comeback. He was really the key to UConn getting closer in that game. He's had performances like this in some losses where not a lot was going well for UConn, but Tristen Newton was. That includes the Kansas game this year, Xavier last year, last year's national championship, as well as even the Villanova game this year. I think Dan Hurley gave Newton a lot of credit for that. He had 15, 8, and 8 in the Marquette win. He really is the closest to a answer for anything, the answer when things are going down that UConn has. And that's huge. That's a good performance. I really like to see that, even despite the loss, I have to say.
Yeah, he had Tristan. We're gonna get to Villanova here in a second, but he had 25 points against Villanova when not a lot of things were working, and that was the first instance of UConn's unstoppable offense showing some signs of like, okay, like that's there are some ways to get around it. Um, yeah, he is your break glass in case of emergency type of player, and one thing I would love to see is just spread the court and let him work people one on one because he has that unique combination of athleticism and size to get into the paint. He's not like a blow by you athlete, but he just has all of these. He has such a solid footwork and quickness ratio that he's able to kind of like leverage himself and draw these fouls. And he has shown to make good decisions also when attacking the paint. You have Donovan Clingan sitting right there if they send help. Sometimes I wonder, like, would UConn would be better off spreading the court and letting him work some two game with Clingan and having Spencer and Caravan waiting to attack off the rim. That's a simplified offense, and obviously everyone prefers UConn run something a little more intricate. But when things aren't working, sometimes you have to almost just like dumb it down. It's just like spread them out, play one on one, and take what the defense gives you. And the good thing is that UConn has shown throughout this season that they have the ability to win different ways. And sometimes one of those ways is going to be Tristan Newton putting the team on his back.
Yeah, I mean, I think Newton is someone like that. Castle could potentially develop into someone who has some of those tendencies. And yeah, I mean, look, I think we're also need to understand that UConn has more here. UConn has more to give. UConn has another counterpunch to what has just happened to it here, and more to offer. I think, as you talk about some potential other strategies to run a little bit more, or maybe give Klingon some more usage offensively. I mean, those are all things that are possible in the future, and maybe there's a few more tricks up their sleeve that the coaching staff has. It's just crazy. We're talking about, we're going pretty in depth on a big loss here. We also have to talk a little bit, at least, about this huge win over Marquette. We did our preview show last week. Huh, Patrick, I'm thinking about some things we said in the preview show last week. Did we have UConn? Did we both have UConn winning big, even though they were hosting the number 4 team in the country? Is that something we predicted?
I had people coming up to me, tears in their eyes, saying, "I can't believe you nailed that. That's like, how did you figure that out? Like, please tell me your secret."
Yeah.
Um, no, I'm not going to do any of those things, but I will say I did call UConn 70 to 55. They blew that out of the water. Um, did I look like an idiot in the beginning? Absolutely. But it turned out the way we thought. I think we just had a feeling about that game and a feeling about the energy and vibes that the XL Center was going to bring in the way UConn was playing. And I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit of the same on Saturday if you're ready to get into that.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, yeah, what a weird and interesting one-and-one stretch, beating number 4 badly, then losing at number 15. They'll be at Marquette again later, but before that, yeah, this Saturday, College Game Day is in stores. The Huskies are hosting Villanova at Gampel. We'll have $2 beers once again, a triumphant moment for our culture anytime we get that. And, the Huskies are going to be extra motivated. I think we saw Dan Hurley express just how locked in he is. And the Huskies should be locked in. This game was closer than expected last time. Now, it was not as close as that 1 point final score would indicate. Congrats on the fraudulent 3 there, Villanova, to make a 4-point loss, a 1-point loss. Power to you. But it was a really weird game. Klingon came off the bench. UConn overall, like statistically, played all right, but as a performance, it was pretty streaky in the game. Villanova shot over 50% in the second half to get back into it. The game was tied with 4 minutes left. It was tied again with 3 minutes left, even though the Huskies had a big lead earlier. I thought the Huskies did a good job maintaining control. The end of the game kind of was decided by a foul call. I'm brave enough and bold enough to admit that, even though, again, I think UConn was in control there. A foul call really did end up an offensive foul call on Villanova. Two offensive foul calls did really end up making the difference. And Villanova, look, they come into this game having won 3 in a row, 4 of their last 5. They just took down Seton Hall and Georgetown before a win over Butler to get their record to 15-11. I know there's been a lot of ink spilled about Kyle Neptune and the job he's doing. That's not our job to discuss, but it does look like Villanova is playing well heading into this matchup. They have some things going. Patrick, what are your thoughts?
You hear so much in sports in general about how, oh, they're greater than the sum of their parts. No disrespect to Villanova because they're a very dangerous team, but like right now they seem like a team where their individual pieces are better than their some of their parts. Chalk it up to the transfers, the coaching, but like they have a lot of individually talented dudes that like when you look up and down their roster, like, oh wow, TJ Bamba, like that's tough. Hakeem Hart, Tyler Burton, Mark Armstrong's playing better. They got Brandon Housen coming off the bench, lighting it up. Eric Dixon has been a nightmare for the Big East for what feels like forever. Um, Yet you look at their weird losses to Penn and everything like that, and then you stack that up with like wins against North Carolina and Texas Tech. It seems like when those type of teams that have a ton of individual talent get hot, they overachieve, and when they don't, they crumble. You have to hope that with the Creighton loss, $2 Miller Lite night, Richard Hamilton's induction ceremony at halftime, college game day, the hashtag vibes are going to be off the charts. This could be a huge get right game. But yeah, you did mention how weird that first game in Philadelphia was. A ton of stats were split evenly. Um, 3-point field goal percentage, rebounding was pretty close. Second chance points were close. Bench points were close. The real difference there was fast break points, and we'll get to that in the keys of the game. And that was due to two huge kill shots that UConn had, both to start the game and then I think it was earlier in the second half. Right now, the bracketologists have Villanova as as an in after their win at Butler on Tuesday. Like you said, they've won 4 of their last 5, but they have this 5-game skid in January, so there's not a lot of room for error. And we're at the point in the season, UConn's going to see this also against like Seton Hall and Providence, where teams are fighting for bids. Right now, there's 3 locks in UConn, Creighton, and Marquette, and there's this, the other tier is Seton Hall, Providence, Villanova, maybe even St. John's a little bit if they catch hot if they catch a heater. Teams are going to fighting for their bids and going to get their best shot. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating game. I think UConn's going to come out and absolutely demolish them, but we've been wrong before, not a ton, but other notes that stuck out to me. Spencer and Caravan went a combined 3 of 11 from 3 against Villanova, kind of similar to how they performed against Creighton. And that was another instance of those two guys struggling with switchability and guys that can get up on them and limit their movement. That's going to be the case again. So UConn's going to have to be able to scheme to get these guys open and get them shots. And then down low, Dixon he had combined 16 points against UConn in the last 2 games, but he put up 22 points against Butler, who was like weirdly not double teaming. So the biggest worry there is if Dixon gets clinging into foul trouble a little bit, what happens? And if this Brandon Housen guy is just doing his best Joey Calcaterra impression, he has double figures in his last 5 games and at least 3 threes. Compare that to like he put up a goose egg in 11 minutes versus UConn. So Neptune has at least figured out how to use him, and there's enough pieces around there that this could be an interesting game. But I have too much faith in UConn's ability to respond after a loss that to take this like a 2-game skid. I really don't see happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much going to be a permanent key to the game going forward for UConn, which is keeping Donovan Clingan on the floor. It's step one for any opponent is to get him off of the floor by getting him into foul trouble, especially with Hurley's deep reliance on sitting players with 2 fouls. Though he did put him back in just now in the Creighton game, so he does have some inkling of being able to do that. At any rate, I think you bring up a great point about just Villanova having a lot to play for here, maybe even a little bit more than what UConn has to play for in this situation. However, to talk about what UConn does have to play for, they've got 4 games left in the season. They've got 2 home games left. Okay, you've got Villanova right here on Saturday. You've got Seton Hall in a week after this on Sunday. After that, you're traveling to Marquette and you're visiting Providence. You know that those are tough games. You just firsthand learned how difficult any road Big East game is. These 2 home games are must wins if you want to win the conference, if you want to have this regular season end the way that you want. Now, again, that's not as much to play for as your postseason livelihood, the way Villanova is right now. But we'll see. It's a streaky team. It's been an inconsistent team. Obviously, playing UConn is your Super Bowl. When you host them in Philly, that's your biggest home game of the year. And when you're Villanova and you're going to play there, that's your second biggest game of the year is playing at UConn. But let's get into keys to the game here. Aside from Dan Hurley's tweets, which I do think has been a key factor in this game already, the fans are riled up days before, and they're going to be riled up hours before as well with College Game Day. And I imagine the campus will be pretty raucous, honestly, from that time in between game day and the 8 p.m. Tip off. But Patrick, what are your keys to the game here for UConn to win?
We've danced around them, but you want to get Caracam unlocked. They when those two guys are shooting that their season clips from the field, it opens up everything. It opens up driving lanes, it opens up passing lanes. So find ways to get them early baskets. It doesn't have to be even threes for Cam Spencer. Just get him open in space and let him attack. He's gotten better at that little mid range. He can get into the lane and make things happen. We saw against Creighton, they just had no movement whatsoever. So getting them untracked would be my big thing. Um, Avoid foul trouble, very obvious one. You can pull any stat out of the book that shows you how UConn is just obliterating people when Klingon is on the court for extended periods of time. That's no disrespect to Samson Johnson. It's more magnifies Klingon's unseen and like less stat driven impact on the game. So avoiding foul trouble, making sure he can contain Dixon without fouling, because that kind of gets Villanova on a roll, I think, if they can establish a post presence inside. And lastly, which is an interesting one, is set the tone with the fast break. And I know UConn's not a team that likes to get out and run, but Villanova's average possession length is 18.8 seconds. That's 321st in Division One. If they can get out and run, I think that would avoid Villanova, UConn facing a set defense that is pretty good. And we saw how UConn struggled with that in the first game. Villanova's defense is Ken Palm. I think it's Ken Palm 19, which is technically better than UConn's. So if they can get out and run and at least get to them before that defense is set, there can be some easy baskets there, the same way that happened in the first game. I know that runs counter to like Klingon and his ability, but um, I think those three things, there's enough talent, there's enough hashtag vibes going around that I'm going to put a 15-point UConn win on the books right now.
Wow, into the universe again with a large UConn win predicted. I think 15 points was your margin predicted for the Marquette game too.
It was. It was.
I'm expecting it to be still a little bit closer. I do like UConn to win, but I'm going to go with a 5 to 7 point win. Just like the Marquette game, I'm a little bit more cautious than you, but I still do think UConn has this one. I think one thing I really liked about the Villanova game last time was that even though they were up big and relinquished a lead, they kept their composure and in a tied game in the final minutes came away with that win. So that's what gives me confidence going forward. The Huskies will be tipping off at 8 p.m. on Saturday. If you are looking for something entertaining to do in stores beforehand, there's a women's hockey game at 3 o'clock in the Toscano Family Ice Forum and a men's game at 5. The women are going for a clinch of the Hockey East regular season crown. So, again, if you happen to be on campus there to maybe check out game day, you've got a game in the middle to watch. And like I said, I think stores might be a party in between, little winter day party in the hours between game day and this 8 p.m. tip. So, we're all very excited. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you again next week.